Today on Safe Nation, we're talking to Candice Simeoni. She's a law enforcement officer out of Maine, and she's the founder of an elder abuse task force. So today she's going to talk about elder abuse and neglect. Hey guys, my name is Nikki Renfro. I'm a recently retired state trooper, and I decided to start a podcast, Safe Nation Podcast. We're covering safety, security, and law enforcement. Well, I'm glad this finally worked out. Like, cause I don't know what it is, but I've wanted to kind of raise the awareness again. It's like we can never get enough of doing it, right? Raising the awareness about elder abuse, elder neglect, and all of those important topics. So that's why I'm really excited to have you. Now, I want to make sure I pronounce your last name correctly. Is it Simeoni or Simeoni?
That's perfect. It's Simeoni.
Simeoni. Okay. Candice Simeoni. Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure. Well, and by the way, we just hit record. We hit record earlier, and of course we'll edit out some stuff.
Sure.
So I just kind of like, the conversation. I don't want to get caught up on the fact that it's so recorded, but I want to get more into just the heart of the matter.
Absolutely.
But Candice Simeoni is our guest today, of course, on Safe Nation, and I'm so grateful to have you here.
Thank you for having
And you are a law enforcement officer in the state of Maine,
me. I am.
and you specialize. One of your specialties has to do with elder abuse and elder neglect, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. How did you get into specializing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, I'm a police officer. I'm reaching my 20 year, actually, I'm 21 years this coming year. And thank
Congratulations.
you. Yeah, it's crazy to think about. It actually makes me feel old as I think about these numbers. One of the other things I started was the York County Elder Abuse Task Force, and that was in 2005. So that's what I'm coming up on for my 20-year anniversary with that task force. And much of my police work is actually run parallel with my task force work, and that encourages a lot of collaboration through the multidisciplinary approach, which is using other professions to help remedy cases that I wouldn't necessarily be able to do by myself as a law enforcement officer. And I really try to empower other frontline responders to take some initiative when it comes to helping our older population. I've worked myself on the front line investigating these cases my entire career. The first case I worked, I just knew that my calling was to take care of our older population. And as you know, in law enforcement, there are a lot of niches, whether it's having a passion for drug crime, child abuse, domestic violence, all of those very, very important niches. But for me, for some reason, my calling was to take care of our older population. Uh,
What was that call? I mean,
you
why
know,
why that?
so I was raised, I call myself a country bumpkin from Maine, very strong family roots. I loved my grandparents. I had sleepover parties with my nana. I just absolutely embraced, the respect for our older population. But coming into law enforcement, my first gig in law enforcement was actually just next in a neighboring town. And our coastline is inundated with older population sitting in beautiful homes. Maybe they're family homes, uh, alone, isolated, and lonely. And so I immediately started visiting those houses for calls, whether it's they had fallen or they had questions, etc. And I started collecting a lot of grandparents, to say the least. And I just felt I saw their vulnerabilities almost right away, and I just felt like I needed to take that as a sign that that would be my niche, and that's what I've been doing now for the last 20 years. I tell people I think a lot of my passion comes from holding their hands and wiping their tears. And, that's something that I take to sleep with me at night. I lay down and I think about that and try to be not only a better person, but a better officer for them. And this is just how my last 20 years have been.
Not everyone has that same level of compassion for that segment of our population. So I commend you for taking care of those who've taken care of us. You know what I mean? Like how the
Funny you say
tables
that.
turn, you
That's
know?
our quote. So the task force has a motto. and that's taking care of those who once took care of us. So that just gave me goosebumps.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's so great. But it's so true though. I mean, as we begin to age, it's up to us and our age range and our age group to take care of them. Someone has to, because at some point it's going to be us, right? One day, and we'll
Absolutely.
need someone to take care of us.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing out there? Tell me, first of all, let's kind of break it down. Like when we talk about elder abuse and elder neglect, what exactly, in what ways are they being abused and neglected?
Yeah, sure. So, when I talk about elder abuse, the first thing people seem to think about is scams, the Nigerian scams, the lottery scams that are going out that are all sensationalized through commercials and flyers, or grandparent scams are a big one right now. But I think what's very profound and something that we need to talk about a little bit more is that 80 to 90% of all of my suspects are family members or somebody that the older person loves and trusts. And so that's something that we don't talk about a lot. And, our older population doesn't want to talk about it a lot either. I teach up at the Maine Criminal Justice Academy, the segment on elder justice investigations. And I play a video of somebody who was severely abused by her grandson and got to a point where she was dying. And she called 911 and had a lengthy conversation with the dispatcher, given every opportunity to explain who that suspect was, and she refused to say that it was her grandson. And that's profound. And that's something that I make sure I kind of talk about the hard stuff. I try not to sugarcoat things because, like I said, I'm holding those hands and I'm drying those eyes, and I'll say the hard stuff because we need to stop this, and we need to take an initiative, lock arms, do whatever to protect our older population. The state of Maine statistics, the U.S. Census Bureau states that we are the oldest state in the nation by population age. And so that's valuable for me when I talk to other people saying, we need to do this. Like, we're only getting older here, and we need to make sure that we're protecting our aging population.
So you're telling me it's stranger danger. This is a it's it's not rather stranger danger, but instead it's right there at home. It's homegrown. It's people that that are family members that are supposed to be taking care of that population, but instead they're abusing them as well. And that's really sad.
It is sad, and we also know, and I think this is a very underreported statistic, that for every one case I get to investigate, five other ones are occurring as well. So for me, every time I get a case, I sit down and I have a humble moment and think, I get to work this case as best as I can and do the best I can because I'm missing five others. So I take it pretty serious. And, especially knowing that it's maybe a family member or someone they love, or maybe the only family member they have left that I'm going to have to I'm going to have to talk to as my suspect. They're tough cases. They truly are tough cases, and I understand why law enforcement has a hard time investigating them.
Yeah. So give me an example of what some of these are. So you kind of started off, you alluded to like the scams.
Mhm.
We're familiar with those.
Yeah,
Gosh, you get inundated with these phone calls trying to, so that's more of the financial,
sure.
that's the more the financial type. But like, what are some of the other ways that our seniors and elderly are being taken advantage of?
Yeah, so a lot of people will say no. So what's elder abuse? And I explain it as an intentional act of harm, or sometimes the failure to act. So for example, when I say failure to act, we have a lot of cases here in the state of Maine that involve caregivers. So caregivers intentionally failing to act. So not giving medications or not paying the bills for the older person on purpose because they're maybe paying themselves, or we have these cases every once in a while where caregivers will do some crazy making. And what I mean by that is I had a case where there was an older woman who I had a chance to speak to, and she says, it's okay. I'm not going to be a good victim because I'm going crazy. And I said, well, explain to me what that means. And so we had a conversation, and I realized that it was her son who was, her caregiver was her son, who was purposely moving items and then recognizing them. For example, Mom, where are your glasses? And she says, oh, they're right here beside me. And she'd look and there were no more, her glasses weren't there. They were across the room. And so he would say, oh, Mom, they're over here. You're losing it. Should we go to the doctor? Or kind of making her feel so dependent on him that she didn't want to tell me the truth at first. So, these things are happening right now in our neighborhoods, with our neighbors, our people we know, but it's a very fragile situation. And so it's not talked about as much as it should be. And so I'm not able to help as many people as I would like to help, for sure.
Mhm. Gosh, okay. And so there comes a time when we have to make a decision about whether we're going to care for um, our loved ones at home or whether we need to put them in a facility to get around the clock care. Now, you've just explained that sometimes even the family members are the ones creating the issue, and they're the ones creating the abuse or the neglect. But in these facilities, what are we seeing there?
Yeah.
What do you see there in the facilities, and what are some red flags?
Sure. So in law enforcement, so in my realm, if you will, we have jurisdiction, which I know you know about. And so I have always worked on a municipal level. So I work for towns or small cities. That's a municipal officer, and that's what I do. I've had the privilege to work statewide on these cases. So I've been able to see a lot. And I will tell you that Maine, and I'm not sure if that's consistent with every other state, we have a good group of investigators, if you will, or resources that we can reach out to when it involves a facility. So when a crime occurs inside of a facility, we don't always feel so alone like if it was inside their home. So we would use it's called the Healthcare Crimes Unit. There's an ombudsman unit, and then we also rely on adult protective services a lot. So when something occurs inside a facility here in the state of Maine, we do have a lot of resources that will go in and investigate cases together. So generally for me, I will leave that more so to them because they're more savvy. I'm more of I think I'm a resource because I not really pass the buck, but say, hey, here's a case that's occurred in a healthcare facility. I'm right here with you, but you're taking lead on this one. So I do more so cases outside of those facilities.
Okay, I got you. But is there anything that you can think of that they need to be looking for? Any, whether it's physical signs or whether, I mean, what should we be looking for really in any case, regardless of whether they're at home or in a facility?
So I do a lot of education through the task force and through me as an officer in facilities or long-term and short-term care facilities, rehab centers, things like that. And so I always talk about the gut punch. So and when I teach at the academy, I say the same thing to all the new officers. I said, hey, you're gonna go chit chat with some little kids and they're gonna ask what your favorite tool is or your favorite weapon is. And I challenge you to talk about the gut punch. And they're all like, what? It's when you feel something doesn't feel right. If there's something, we're born with that. Every single person is born with the most amazing tool, and that's that gut punch. That feeling you're like, something doesn't feel right, or she's not acting right. Trust that gut punch. And I always say, have those conversations. I miss the days when, we'd bring pies to our neighbors and, we'd be friends versus calling because the neighbors' leaves are falling or being blown in our yard. I want to bring back that human I guess love and care, and it's okay to care about somebody rather than taking offense to it. So I say that if something doesn't feel right, call me, call law enforcement, call adult protective services and say, hey, you know, Mrs. Smith has not gone to church in the last 3 weeks. I'm worried about her. Her son moved in and we just haven't seen her. And that's okay to make that call. Our adult protective services hotline and online format is all confidential. So if something doesn't feel right, you got that gut punch, just ask someone for help or share your story because you could really help someone or even save their life. So I always say that is you feel like there's something there's something doesn't feel right, just ask for help, or allow me to work on it. Give me that chance to help somebody. So I know it's hard when it comes to family members. I totally understand that. And our generation, I have a lot of my victims will say this to me when it's their grandson or their daughter or whatnot. They're the most amazing niche of our population, I'm telling you right now. They will say, if they did something wrong or they're breaking the law, it's my fault because I raised them or I helped raise them. So I deserve what's coming to me. There are so many times that I've had these conversations with the most humble, amazing people who feel like they truly they're the reason why something's happening. And it's hard for me because a lot of times I'm dealing with someone who's facing a substance use disorder or someone who's in major debt. And I've had the chance to actually speak to suspects who actually been gone to jail for doing crimes like this. And I remember this one person that I spoke to, this suspect, this defendant, and he says to me, I had to find the path of least resistance. And in this case, it was his great aunt. I knew she'd give me the money. I know I could take her checks from the back of her checkbook. I know I could go to her bathroom and take pills if I wanted to, and she would never tell on me. And he felt bad and remorseful at that time. But that's the reality of it. And that's very important to understand that people who are abusing our older population may have other motives, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right.
Right.
So, and it's not their fault at all. And
No.
the cases that I've been able to work when it involves family members and we've been able to resolve some things, um, that I've had some great cases about those who have substance use disorder. This is the wake up call, and they got better. And this I just our older population should not have to face the victimization that they're facing. This is a time when they should be enjoying their life. They paved the way for us, for our freedoms, for who we are today. And it just breaks my heart to see them victimized and living out their last few years of their lives in shame and guilt and sadness, fear. It's not right. It drives me nuts.
Yeah. So give me an idea of what are some of the charges that can be brought against a person for these offenses?
One of the first things I do when I go teach at the academy to the new cadets, I ask them all to find the elder abuse law and the state laws in the state of Maine. And it strikes me because all of them try to fumble through our statute books looking for elder abuse cases in law, and it's not in there. And so law enforcement officers need to realize that any crime, whether it's theft by deception, whether it's physical assault or abuse, all of that is elder abuse. If it involves somebody who's over the age of 60 in our state, that's elder abuse. So don't tell me that there's no elder abuse laws in the state of Maine. Every law in our book could possibly be a crime against our older population. So I do encourage officers to pursue those to find the elements of crime. However, I also say that when you're dealing with an elder abuse case, because we know about 90% of all the suspects are somebody they love and trust, you need to be very delicate with it, right? So your primary goal can never be prosecution, right? So you got a case, it's great, you write them up, they get a summons, they go to court. Guess what? They may have to pay a fine, but guess where they're going to end back up, right? Probably living with the person that they're abusing. It's not always the best remedy for an elder abuse case. So that's why I tell everybody the multidisciplinary approach is so vital, and that's why my task force is everything to me. Besides my son, they're my pride and joy. They're my proudest thing I've ever created, because the resolutions of our cases, even if they're not something in the crime system, the court system, as long as that older person is safe and happy at the end of our relationship, that's a success. That's more successful to me than a statistic in the court system. And so that's why I rely on the York County Elder Abuse Task Force to help me, because we can remedy it civilly. We can change power of attorney paperwork if needed. We can get them into some rehab or programs. There's social workers on my task force. So as long as the end result is successful to me, it's just as successful as a prosecutable offense.
Now, you're the founder of the task force, correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
That you're referring to. Okay, great. And what year was that?
So I started it in 2005, which is just the year after I started law enforcement myself. Um, and like I said, I could talk about this, about our task force for about a day.
I think we should talk about it a little bit. Yeah, let's that's where I'm going. I want to talk about it a little bit because
Okay.
you're the founder of the task force.
Mhm.
We've talked about your passion for this segment of our population, and how you feel compelled to protect that segment of the population. And so you founded the task force. Tell me, what criteria does it take for you to take on a case, for your task force to get involved? What needs to happen?
Yeah, so our task force's primary goal is actually education. So I know, and all of us know who have a passion for this niche of crime, that in order to get ahead of this, we need to stop it before it starts. So time and time again, I get cases where the money's all gone. The real estate has already been sold. The cars are gone. Everything's gone. And then I get the case and they ask, I want everything back. And it's pretty much impossible. So for me, my whole goal is to stop it before it starts, especially when it comes to those Nigerian scams or the Jamaican scam. The ones that are overseas that we can't generally follow up on or pursue. Um, so I feel like education is important. So make sure that all of the task force members are comfortable with educating. And educating doesn't only mean the general public. Like, for example, I teach Southern Maine social workers group every single year. It's their ethics credit, if you will, but it gives me a way to talk about elder abuse and what we're seeing, signs, symptoms, how to help them. And so we have financial institutions on our task force too. We only have a 12-member task force, and I do it by design. I keep it very grassroots, and I keep it so that we are all very, very, very different, yet we all share the same heart. And I think that's so important for these cases because the lens that I see through, as you know, as law enforcement, is not the same lens as a social worker may see something through, or a financial institution. I'm terrible. I can't even balance a checkbook. So we all add something to cases to help our victims. When I talk about cases, we do not take cases on ourselves from start to finish. We say, hey, like for me, this is the case that I have. I have no idea what to do with this. Do you guys have any suggestions? And we will all sit around this case and pour ideas and our hearts into it. And it becomes a multidisciplinary case because maybe the resolution isn't prosecution. Maybe it is a social worker avenue. Maybe it does have to go to adult protective services. So that's what my task force is for, is to look at a case and to really kind of peel back the layers of the onion. I always say these cases are like onions, right? So they have several different layers. They stink and they can make you cry, right? And so together we peel back those layers and we feel more confident in these cases versus me on my own as an officer trying to resolve a case that really doesn't have the elements of a crime. And so rather than saying, I'm sorry, I can't help you because it has nothing to do with law enforcement, I can say, hey, listen, criminally, there's nothing that I can really pursue. However, A, B, and C. I'm not going to let you out there. You were brave to come and tell me about this. I'm going to help you. And if it takes me a month or a year, I've had cases that have taken me 2 years. I will not give up on you. I will find resources to help you and I'll make you safe. And so I think that's something, as you know, law enforcement doesn't get to always have that opportunity. And I've been blessed because the chiefs that I've worked for, the administration that I've worked for see the value, they see my passion, and they've let me do this. And that's
I
why,
was gonna say, how do you get the time and the
yeah,
permission
it's
to do
very
it? What
blessed.
people may not understand is, I mean, you don't, even though we know that there's a need for this, right? In law enforcement, we know there's a need for this. You just don't always have the support from within in some cases, and you don't always get the resources or the time to do what you need to do. And so it sounds like you do have a supportive command staff who will allow you the time, the resources, the opportunities, the platform to get this important work done. So kudos to them. Kudos to your chief.
Absolutely. And some people call me the mosquito because I nag. I'm like, hey, here's the deal. I'll come and I'll do what you need me to do, but I'm taking with me my passion. And if you don't want me to be part of that, that's completely fine. And I absolutely respect that. But I will work my tail off to do what you need to get, what you want me to do for your agency. But I'm carrying with me this because it's my passion. I'm going to make a difference. And it's kind of worked out pretty good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about legislation. So we know, I mean, it's fine for us to make cases against people and all of that, but we need the backing of certain legislation, whether that be, at your state level, but even at the federal level. So let's talk legislation. Do you know, like, kind of what's happening legislation wise to support the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm not the only mosquito in the state of Maine per se. We
That's
have,
good.
yeah, we've been able to lock arms with a lot of different professionals, and I think we're making some pretty amazing changes. And actually, I'm going to tell you about one change that I haven't. It's not really public yet, but you're going to be the first one to know, and I think it's
Oh,
pretty.
this is an exclusive. Okay, what drum roll? Like, yeah, flashing lights. Let's hear it.
I think you'll be proud. So a few years back, I represented the chiefs of police in the state of Maine on what's called the Elder Justice Coordinating Partnership. And it was several different professions who came together to create a roadmap for the state of Maine. So going forward, we made top priority recommendations, other recommendations that weren't top, like secondary, and then some other recommendations that kind of were important, but they didn't make top priority. Uh, we worked really hard on that. It was through the governor's office, and we came up with some amazing top priorities. And we've been able to actually check off boxes through the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Health and Human Services, all surrounding and embracing crimes against our older population. So that's something that's pretty important to us. And one of the top priority recommendations that I made, because as you know, law enforcement, it's really hard. So this niche of crime, for the most part, a lot of it stops at the front line. So if law enforcement officers don't see elder abuse or the elements of crime, they don't understand what they're looking at, we clear a call and it may never ever come to light again. And so it's important for me, for law enforcement, to really understand what they're seeing, because some of these cases that we're getting do get prosecuted, and they're huge. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars. Um, they're big cases. And so I want officers to be excited about that possibility for sure. But I also, the education, not only to the general public, but to law enforcement needs to be increased. And so I have tried for several years to get law enforcement positions to just investigate exploitation, fraud against our older population because it's significant. And in law enforcement, we're not supported generally federally with funding just because it's just a rule, if you will. And so I've applied through the Department of Public Safety through several different grants, and always because I'm a law enforcement officer, I don't make the cut. Well, as of last month, I was just informed that I'm approved. I'm going to be a state investigator for elder justice. I am going to have the opportunity to sit with all agencies, law enforcement agencies in the state of Maine, to collect real frontline data, to mentor officers, to co-investigate cases on a 2-year pilot study. So I could cry because I'm so excited. I went down to Washington, D.C. I testified in front of the U.S. Congress in 2019 on this idea. And so I've been working really hard. Again, the mosquito. We got to do this. We got to do this. And it was approved. So I should be starting that position in the next couple months. And it's pretty significant for the state of Maine. And it's really the only type of project that's happened in our nation so far. So I'm I'm very excited about it. And I'm going to work my heart out to make sure that it's successful and hopefully sustainable in the future. So that's what it takes for legislation. They've got to know what's happening. We can't just assume that they know that there's no strong elder abuse case law or crimes or statutes. We can't assume that. We got to work hard. And if you believe in something, you've got a passion for something, you can't just assume someone else is going to step up and say something. You got to do it, whether you're comfortable with it or not. And that's when you start making those differences.
Congratulations to
Yeah,
you. Oh,
yeah,
that's amazing.
it's
It feels
exciting.
good, right? It
Feels so good.
feels like, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of I'm misty about it too, because when you've worked so hard and poured so much of your heart into what you do, we use that word passion a lot, but and that's what it is. But you're saving potentially so many lives. The work that you're doing really is just a blessing. It's a blessing for individuals themselves and their families and those people who care about them. And so, congratulations to you for sticking to it. You
Thank
could have
you.
just let it go and you could have moved on to something else, but you chose not to.
Yeah,
So,
and
we
it's fun.
need people in the fight like you. We need them in the fight, people just like you. So,
Yeah,
again, congratulations to you.
yeah, thank you.
And I was, as you were speaking just now, I was thinking about what are some ways that and some clues that law enforcement should be picking up on when they get these calls for service and they involve our elderly population. What what are some things that they should be looking for? Like
Yeah,
they don't need to miss it. I know it's, I mean, the call log may be stacked up. You might have one call after another and you're just trying to clear the call. You get there, you handle what you got and you move on. I get it.
yeah.
But sometimes it's worth slowing down just a little bit to listen, to watch, to see what's happening, to be a lot more observant. So, what are some of the things they should be looking for?
Yes, absolutely. So multiple well-being checks. We write a lot of, and I'm gonna accept complete ownership of this too because I've done it as an officer, especially a young officer. I couldn't wait to get to the next exciting call. I couldn't wait to go to the exciting, like, I don't know, traffic stops or go to the domestic or the fun thing. I don't say fun, but like exciting things that we get to do as officers, and especially young ones. We want to get to as much as we can. So many, it's, uh, clear the call, go to the next. And these cases take, like I said, sometimes years to really put your heart and mind and resources into. And so I understand how easy it is to miss these cases. But, and I've written off cases that ended up turning into huge ones as well. For example, the multiple well-being checks. As officers, we get called to the same house over and over again for well-being checks. We have sometimes older people who have some we assume some memory issues, and we get called, she's seeing something in the backyard or whatever the calls, the repetitive calls are. Sit with them, not in the moment, not when they called. Go do a follow-up a day later and sit with them and say, what's going on? Can I help you with something? Maybe they just need someone to take the extra minute and have a conversation with them, and then they're going to tell you some of their most scariest things that are happening in their life, right? And I have a good example of this. So I was on the call. I took an overtime shift on one of the agencies that I worked with, and there was a woman who would call every Saturday night. It's kind of a joke. We assumed she had mental health issues, and so every Saturday she'd call and ask for the pizza special every Saturday. And so, people like, she's so nice. Like, what are we gonna say for the pizza special this Saturday? Whatever. And so I happened to work an overtime shift, and she called, and it was mushrooms and anchovies that day. And so they called, yeah, mushrooms and anchovies, and then they hang up the phone. They're like, oh, she's so nice. And then we all walked away, and I'm like, all right, who's going? And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, who's going to go do a well-being check on her? And everyone was like, you never really thought about doing that. She's called like in the last 3, 4 weeks. So I'm going to go do a well-being check on her. Guess what? Her son would come on Saturday nights and make her give him money. And it's one of those things where she's like, I didn't want to tell on him. I wanted someone to be there when it was happening and just kind of feel that gut punch. And then I could tell them the truth, and maybe we could get him help. He had a substance use disorder. Maybe we could get him help. And I needed someone else to see what was going on. It felt wrong to me, but I didn't want to tell on my son. And it's those moments where it's like, okay, sometimes we get a fish for our cases. Sometimes it can't always be reactive. Sometimes we can't always just respond and then clear. You're going to be a little more proactive with cases that I feel like are the most important. The human. I vowed my whole career to what I call humanizing the badge, making people know that we're human too. We make mistakes. We have struggles in our life. We're human. We're moms, dads, sisters, cousins, like we're human. And we can have those conversations. Just because I'm in a uniform, it's not a shell. It's something that gives me a leverage to come and help you. So use that. And a lot of our older population are intimidated by our uniforms. And so just going the extra mile and doing those follow-ups. I used to love when I worked patrol. I worked with patrol for about 10, 12 years. And the guys would always make fun of me because it's me and I'm always doing these huggy feely things. But I loved going to ambulance calls. As weird as that sounds, it gave me an opportunity to get into the homes of a lot of our older population who did some falls or whatever the call may be.
Wait, you can't be an ambulance chaser and a cop.
Oh,
Like,
I am. So
leave that up to the attorneys, okay?
we would respond as officers to ambulance calls in our community. So I'd hear it on the radio, hey, ambulance call, which we would respond to, but generally it was just to find the residents for the ambulance so they could see our cruisers. But I'd actually go in and then I'd follow up a week later. And that's where I developed a lot of cases, was developing that credibility within your communities. And I know the bigger towns, or for us in the state Maine troopers, they're on the turnpike, they don't have an opportunity. But us municipal officers, I don't know. I feel like that should be something that we do in our day to day, is being a little more human, doing a little more proactive policing, and saving some lives that way, because I think it's just as important.
So we can add social worker to the
Oh,
the many hats that law enforcement officers wear. Social worker for sure, because what you're talking about is that, and it's community driven. It's just like you said. I mean, it's caring about your neighbor, and it's taking care of those older people in the community, and somebody to kind of look out for them.
yeah.
So in that example you gave about when the person kept calling and calling, and the you're so right. I think sometimes we get complacent and we just get used to, and we've missed it. We've totally missed that. And in your example, what this person wanted was someone to come out. This
Yeah.
person but they just could not say it. So they were kind of giving in their own way hints. It was just their outcry. And so we just got to get to a point where we're not missing it, and we can't be so complacent, because we can be very cynical. That's just us, and it's the profession sometimes. But we've got to think beyond that and just do that extra check, like you talked about, just in case, just to make sure, and to clear your own conscience. So
Absolutely.
I think that's great. That's great advice to officers. Now, what do you think would be some barriers to even family members, let's say, reporting an issue, doing any sort of reporting of abuse or neglect? What are some of those barriers, other than backlash from, I mean, I probably get backlash, especially if it's another family member that's involved, get a lot of backlash there. But what may be some of the other barriers to reporting that we have to overcome?
So, as professionals in the state of Maine, we do have a plethora of mandated reporters. So much of us, if we feel like there's an abuse or a neglect situation happening, we have to. We're mandated to report to Adult Protective Services. But the general public and family members, like you said, don't have that. And it's for our older generation, like I told you the incidents earlier where the woman had told me, well, if there's a crime occurring, if he's abusing me, or if he's a suspect, it's my fault because this is how I've raised him. There's a lot of interfamily, and I don't want to say drama, but there's a lot of family
You
elements,
can say
moving
it.
parts,
It's
drama.
there. Look,
it,
there's
it,
drama. Okay.
there's a whole lot of family drama and dynamics that, whether it's just how they are raised, whether it's a religion, whether it's just how society views people. I had a case, it was a significant case where there were people who were involved in the town, Board of Selectmen members, and they didn't want to tell because of They think, you see it on TV that the son's going to come and get arrested and they're going to be on the news and it's going to be sensationalized. And, so I think a big barrier is law enforcement and the media and, what they think is going to happen when they report and they ask for help versus what the reality of what really happens. So I always tell the victims in the case, we work together. If we get to a point and I have elements of a crime to arrest somebody, I'm not going to do it without talking to you. We're a team. I have stickers, little badge stickers that sometimes I'll give to my suspect and say, we're in this together. And I'm not going to do something that's going to make you uncomfortable. We're going to work this case together and we're going to make sure you're safe and we're going to make sure that they get help. Or whatever the scenario is, they're always very different. That's the thing with these cases is, you know, they're all so different, but they're all an onion for sure.
Right.
Um, so that is the barrier, is how you've got to take the time to understand family dynamics. Another barrier is as we age, cognitive impairment plays a place. Dependency, it plays a part in some of these cases, and so as an officer, you've got to understand what's happening, cognitively with our older population. And if your your subject that you're dealing with, your victim has potentially cognitive impairment and board, you've got to learn about that and understand that and work with them on that level too. So it's not easy. These cases aren't easy, and I respect that and I understand that, but they're so worth it. Our older population is so worth the time and tears. I can't even tell you how many times I've been sappy, or, like I said, I go to bed at night and I see some of my victims. Like, it's just a passion that I have, and it's an obligation that I made when I said, yes, I swear I want to be a police officer and I want to help people. And this is a huge way to help people and to really respect those who paved the way to who we are today. It means a lot to me.
I can tell it does, and I'm glad. Again, I'm glad it means this much to you. You know, as we wrap up, I'm thinking about, like, what's some of the worst. Give me the worst example, the worst case you can think of that you've been involved in. What were the elements of that case?
So, I mean, I'm working on 6 cases right now just from this week. There's always cases. And one that always resonates with me is a case where the suspect was a pastor. When you
Uh,
go in and you take advantage of our older population who has lost everything but their love and faith in God, and you come in and play that and you take advantage of our older population, there's a special place for you. And it's heartbreaking and devastating because a lot of the time the court doesn't help us in prosecuting cases like this. We are up against time. When this case happened to go to court, suspects were all passed away, witnesses had passed away. And so, I feel like that's the case that it haunts me to this day, to know that somebody would prey on the most amazing population of our life and use their vulnerabilities, because that's what these suspects do. Whether it's a scam artist or whatnot, they find the most vulnerable way to get somebody to make some bad decisions. And whether it's romance and love, or being scared, or holding your family over your head, it burns me. And I can't even tell you how horrible it is to talk to a victim and say God, the person of God who you believe in is is abusing you. And the conversation that I've had to have on multiple occasions, whether it's somebody like that or a family member, I have been spit on, I have been hit, I have been called so many names from victims, and I'm just trying to be honest and tell them what's going on. And they have been so conned or scammed or convinced, that the story that the person is using against them is so true that they don't believe me, who I'm not taking any money. I'm not benefiting from anything except for trying to tell you what's happening and protecting you. And so I think cases involving the heart are the hardest cases to work for sure.
hmm. Well, how can people find out more information? What are the resources out there? Well, first of all, how can they report? I know you can dial 911. I guess that's the easy way to do it, and probably the most direct and best way. But are there any other resources out there for them to do reporting or to get more information and more education?
Sure. When I first started this passion, like, I can't believe it's 20 years ago, it's nuts to me. um, People didn't even understand what elder abuse is. Like, the term was kind of foreign to everybody, and we were kind of learning it all together, actually. Now, 20 years later, if you just Google elder abuse, there is a significant amount of resources, mostly in every state through, their Department of Health and Human Services. They all have some sort of entity of of adult protective services, which have websites. And so you could Google and research that for sure. The feds, like we talked about earlier, their Department of Justice has a whole National Justice Institute of Elder Abuse now. So there are ways to learn. And there are a lot of local resources now that have really embraced this and trying to take care of our older population. So where there's a will, there's a way. And if you want to learn, and I encourage you to do so, just kind of do a little Google, or Google my task force. I've got resources there and I can direct you for sure.
Give us the name of that task force again.
Absolutely. It's the York County Elder Abuse Task Force. And we're on Facebook, and we do have a website.
Okay,
And
excellent.
the task force is amazing. And it's funny, real quickly, before I get too far ahead of myself, is I learned early on when I told you no one knew what elder abuse was. I used to go to local, like I told you earlier in this conversation, I used to go to local facilities, older, long-term care or senior living facilities, and I would put out flyers that said, come learn about elder abuse. And I'd get like 4 or 5 people, which was great. One I'm happy with, but 4 or 5 people. Now I will post something like, come meet Officer Candice Simeoni to learn about the newest scams happening. And I have a whole room full of people. And so I'm learning that I have to be very, I guess, creative with how I entice people to come and talk to me. But I get a lot of cases from those conversations because they realize I usually come with high heels and lipsticks and my hair down, and I'm just a human, but I'm an officer too, and I will work cases. I've worked some tough ones. I'm not afraid of much, and so I think law enforcement going into the community, doing things like that, really going to open up a whole world for them. And when they start working these cases and they feel that success, maybe not prosecute like a court case or a statistic, maybe not that success, but knowing you've helped somebody and what I think is the greatest population in our entire world, it's a really good, fulfilling feeling. But you got to be a little creative. Like with the task force, if you go to the website, you'll see one of the things that we do is we actually grant wishes for anyone over the age of 60 who may have a bucket list wish, if you will, because we want to show people that we respect our older population, and we'll do what we can and be proactive as well. And I want to share with you quickly, one of my very first wishing wells that I granted was Millie Remy was our oldest resident, one of our oldest residents in the state of Maine. She was 106 years old, and she had a little thing for President Bush. And I just so happened to have worked in Kennebunkport, which is where his home is. And with a couple law enforcement agencies, we gave her a whole full police escort to go have a little tea date with the president. And we got a lot of photos, and she dressed up and wore a crisp corsage. And it was one of those moments where I get to show my task force the warm fuzzies. I always tell them I can't pay you in money. We're volunteers, but I'm going to pay you in warm fuzzies. And so I need to make sure that they constantly remember their why. And when we see those victims' tears and hold their hands, and we can't get court cases through court, I always remind them of those moments, the moments that, what, we may not win everything, but we're making a difference. And look what we did. Look what we have the capacity to do. So that's just how I put one foot in front of the other each day.
Yeah, and I mean, and you're right. Sometimes doing the work of a law enforcement officer, you don't always feel or see the reward behind it, or you don't always feel that you're appreciated. But those truly are the rewards, right? Putting a smile on someone's face. I love that. I love that whole concept of granting a wish, but for our most senior, population. You
So
see it for kids all the time, but to let them know that they're not forgotten about at all, that is so important, and that's huge. And so, yeah, I know those officers have to feel good. You have to feel good giving back in that way. So that's
Absolutely.
excellent. I've enjoyed this conversation. I think it's enlightening. I think it's something that many people are having to deal with because guess what? We're living longer and longer now. We're not dying off like we were. I mean, people are living so much longer, so we're going to be around a while. And that means that we still are going to have somewhere to go if we can't stay at home and age until we take our last breath. So someone is going to have to take care of us one way or the other. So thank you for enlightening us about, from the law enforcement side, the work that you're doing with your task force and all of the achievements you've made in this space. I really appreciate you and thank you so much for your passion and for the opportunity to get a chance to chat here on Safe Nation. So, do you have anything else you'd like to leave for our listeners before we go?
I just really appreciate your time, Nikki, and the opportunity to speak about this. It's so important, and I I'm grateful for this time. And like you said at the very beginning, and I'll leave with the quote and the motto that you said, and the motto that we have as a task force is, it's just a matter of taking care of those who once took care of us.
Absolutely. That's it in a nutshell. So, thank you so much, Candace. I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me here.
Thank you so much.
Bye. We'll cut recording right here. That was perfect. Thank you so much.